Good evening, class. In regards to special senses, when it comes to the ear and the eye, I know we didn't cover it and I kind of did a run through for you. I want you to look at the models and I'm going to go through it visually so that you'll know all the parts so I can feel more comfortable, that you'll feel comfortable when you get back to be tested upon it. So what we're looking at here is the ear. You have three regions to the ear. You have an external ear, you have a middle ear, and then you have an inner ear. So we're going to begin with the external ear. If you go and you reference your objectives, it's going to have listed, as well as those exercises that we did in class, it's going to have each part to the external ear, each part to the middle ear, each part to the external ear that you need to know. So we'll begin with the external ear. So this is going to be your auricle. This is that flappy part of your ear. So that's your auricle, or it could be called your pinna. Okay, auricle or pinna. All right, that's going to be this external flappy portion of the ear. Now, when we go to the canal that leads to our ear hole, so this whole S-shaped canal here, that's called your external auditory meatus or external acoustic meatus. And remember to listen to the term. So you have auditory or acoustic, you want to automatically think about hearing. So that's the same thing that was on the skeleton when we did that. It was on the temporal bone. So you have your external auditory meatus. Again, to the external ear, you have your auricle, also known as your pinna. Or then the hole, your ear hole, your opening, is called your external auditory meatus or external acoustic meatus. Now, when we hit the inner ear, I'm going to sit this down. When we hit the inner ear, we're going to pick up this smaller one here. When we get to the inside, the middle ear begins with the tympanic membrane. So the whole purpose of the auricle is to collect the sound. Once we collect the sound then goes down the external auditory meatus, and then it vibrates our eardrum. Now, you can't say eardrum for the test. The correct term is tympanic membrane, and that's this little gray part right here. That's your tympanic membrane. Now, you have three ear ossicles on the inside of the ear. These ear ossicles are responsible for amplifying the sound. So you have three of those. It begins with your malleus, then your incus, and then your stapes. So you can remember the acronym MIS, M-I-S, to help you remember the order. So in other words, we collect the sound at the auricle, travels down the external auditory meatus. That sound is then going to vibrate the tympanic membrane, which is our eardrum. This is why when you have an ear infection, especially a middle ear infection, it causes a lot of problems and pain at that region because the sound is vibrating that tympanic membrane. Now, the ear ossicle that's going to be attached to the tympanic membrane is going to be your malleus. Okay? So the tympanic membrane is going to vibrate the malleus. The malleus is then going to vibrate the incus. The incus is then going to vibrate the stapes. The stapes is going to be this little triangular portion on the inside there. Okay, so here we have tympanic membrane, malleus, incus, stapes on the inside. The stapes opens into the oval window. The oval window is what's going to connect the middle ear to the inner ear. Okay, so now this big virgin here is what the inner ear looks like. You have two parts. You have your cochlea. This cochlea is this cinnamon roll looking structure, almost look like a snail, if you will. So that's your cochlea, and this is your vestibule. At the very end of your vestibule, you have these little loops, okay? These little loops that you see is called your semicircular canals. Semicircular canals. So again, the inner ear looks like this. You have your cinnamon roll, which is your cochlea. You have your vestibule. At the very end of your vestibule, you have these loops called semicircular canals. Now let's break down the semicircular canals for just a little bit. If I was to flip this around, you can see a blue and you can see a yellow. Your semicircular canals are made up of what you call labyrinths. And your labyrinth is just a fancy term that means complicated shape. Okay? So you have an osseous labyrinth. Remember your terminology, osseous means bone. And then you have a membranous labyrinth, which is the blue part that sits inside of the osseous labyrinth. You have two types of fluid that's found on the inside. You have perilymph that's found in between the osseous labyrinth and the membranous labyrinth. On the inside of the blue, which is your membranous labyrinth, you have endolymph. These two fluids together is what gives us balance. That's why also when you get an ear infection or any kind of drainage in the ear, you feel off balance. You feel like you're wavering a little bit. Okay, so let's go back over the inner ear one more time. Cochlea, cinnamon roll. Vestibule here. Loops at the end, semicircular canals. The semicircular canals is made up of an osseous labyrinth On the inside of the osseous labyrinth, you have the membraneous labyrinth. You have perilymph that's found in between the osseous labyrinth, which is a fluid. It's found in between the osseous labyrinth and the membraneous labyrinth. And on the inside of the blue, the membraneous labyrinth, you have endolymph. Now, that's one of the structures you need to know about the inner ear. Cranial nerve number 8. Cranial nerve number 8 is called your vestibulocochlear nerve. Let's figure out where that name comes from. You got a branch that comes from the cochlea. You got a branch that comes from the vestibule. So that leads to our vestibulocochlear nerve. The cochlear part gives us hearing. The vestibule part, as we just talked about, gives us equilibrium. So this is why our ear gives us balance and hearing. Okay, let's run through all of them again. We have our auricle and pinna. Hopefully by now you're saying it with me. So we have our auricle or our pinna. We have this S-shaped canal that's called our ear canal. That's called our external auditory meatus or external acoustic meatus. That external acoustic meatus is going to send the sound down to where? You're correct, the middle ear. The middle ear begins with the tympanic membrane. The ear ossicle, remember Miss? The ear ossicle that's attached to the tympanic membrane is called your malleus. Your malleus is then going to send it to the incus. The incus is then going to vibrate the stapes, which is that little triangular portion on the inside. Now on this smaller model, you can see a smaller version of the inner ear, which has the cochlea here, the vestibule here, the semicircular canals here. Okay, now looking at the structure, we did miss one. The middle ear is connected to the throat by way of another canal, which is this canal here. This is called our eustachian tube or auditory tube. So when you hear about somebody getting their ears plugged or they got to get plugs in their ears, whether it's a child or something because they keep having recurring ear infections, that's going to be this tube that they're plugging. So this is the external, this is called your eustachian tube or auditory tube. It's what connects the middle ear to the throat. Okay, on the larger model, this is going to be this canal here. Okay, your eustachian tube or auditory tube. Okay, that's it. If you have any questions, email me. Okay, thanks.